Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. So we have a fun little activity ahead of us here where we are going to be listing the top players age 25 or younger. The Ringer did a article where they put together a poll of various different voters there at the organization, and they did a top 25. Now, here we don't have necessarily all that time, but I do have a top 10 list, and want to sort of preface this by saying that I tried to operate a little bit under the same circumstances that the Ringer did. They put together this list using 5 different factors: how good they currently are, what they project to be in the next 5 years, what the marketability of these stars are, some of the intangibles having to do with leadership, injury history, all of that, and can they be a franchise centerpiece? So, diving into it here, we have one that I really struggled with coming up with a definitive answer, but by the end, I went with Ja Morant. Now, this number 10 spot for me was between him and Tyrese Maxey, both two of the most exciting young point guards in the NBA. But I did end up leaning with Ja, and I know that, listen, a lot of people have soured on him, and for some pretty good reasons because of some of the off-the-court stuff, and then this year he was dealing with that suspension along with an injury on top of it. But this is somebody that I think has more upside of being a franchise centerpiece and being able to carry a team. Tyrese Maxey, as things currently stood for this season, he was an unbelievable Robin to Joel Embiid, but Ja Morant we saw just a couple years ago make All-NBA second team. He led his team to a series win in the postseason, and we've seen him score 45 points 3 times so far in his playoff career. Tyrese Maxey is also tremendous. He just won his first All-Star appearance earlier this season. He could have been named to the All-NBA team. I know a lot of fans were upset by the fact that he did not, but for what it's worth, we've seen Ja Morant be the number 1 option and lead his team to multiple number 2 seeds. And granted, not to take away from the rest of the Grizzlies organization there, because Taylor Jenkins, I think, is a phenomenal coach. Some of the role players there in Memphis are great as well. But when we saw Joel Embiid go down with injury, we saw Tyrese Maxey, and he was still great individually, but it just didn't contribute to wins. And I don't blame him for that. It's super unfair to put all of that pressure on him. The backup center situation that was there in Philly was obviously a mess defensively, and trying to replace that offensive production as well was just near impossible when Embiid was doing what he was. But ultimately, I'm leaning with Ja Morant here. I expect him to have a bounce-back season moving forward, and he is somebody that I think, again, may not be everybody's favorite, but he can hoop, especially if he can add a little bit more of a perimeter shot. He's going to be a very prominent force in the NBA for the next decade. At number 9, I have Zion Williamson. I had a really hard time placing him on this list as well because the ceiling is sky high, but the risk factor with him is also a massive deal. And that was sort of magnified in a brutal way, but almost in the perfect way to sort of describe what Zion's career has been like so far during that play-in tournament game against the Lakers, where he was going ballistic, scored 40 points, and then ultimately went down with a hamstring injury that looked like nothing, honestly, but it ended up keeping him out for the entire postseason. Games played has been a big issue for Zion, but we understand that he is continuing to add things to his game too, being a little bit more of a point forward as well. I don't know if that three-point shot is ever necessarily going to come into play for him, but he can be, a physical dominance. I think not the exact same, but similar to what Giannis has done in his NBA career up to this point. So I had Zion at 9. Number 8, this one might be a little bit controversial as well. I am very high on Cade Cunningham, and I understand that there has been no winning in the NBA so far for Cade, and that could be seen as a little bit of a contradiction to the point I made about Tyrese Maxey earlier. But Cade is the exact type of archetype that I would want to build my team around, the point forward with high scoring upside. And that's what I think that Cade is, and he showcased this on many opportunities in Detroit, but obviously the Pistons were really bad this year. Monty Williams is a bit of a disaster there at coach. I've been higher on the Pistons upside for the future than most people are. Between him, Ivy, and Duran, and whatever other pieces are around them as well, Ausar Thompson, you can maybe throw into that mix. I'm not, he's somewhere in the middle there. But, Cade is somebody who I think is very much similar to the conversation about Paolo Banchero. Obviously, both number one overall picks in back-to-back years. Cade missed an entire year, though, in the 2022-23 season, and the Pistons being so bad this year. I think he's very much under the radar, and he is due to sort of gain some more respect from the national media in due time. Number 7, I have Chet Holmgren. Chet is somebody who was a number 2, pretty much, probably number 3 for the majority of this year. But if we're putting a list of players who in the next 5 years, what are they going to look like? I think Chet has an extremely high ceiling. He had a little bit more of a, ball handler, decision maker background when he was back in high school. And even he was able to showcase it a little bit when he was at Gonzaga. And now he is going to hopefully be able to add that to his repertoire. We saw different times this year where he was able to go coast to coast by himself. That's something that I anticipate. I'm sure they would like the ball to be in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's hands just about as much as possible. But Chet is somebody that I think can do it all necessarily. The way that he can score, three-point shooting in the postseason for him wasn't tremendous, but we know he can space it out. Once he gets more consistent there, he will continue to be a threat, and I end up having him at number 7 here. Number 6, I have Tyrese Halliburton. Halliburton feels like a pretty polarizing player at this point, especially anytime you have a player in the playoffs go up against the Knicks fan base. There is definitely going to be strong opinions about him. I've been high on Tyrese Halliburton. Now, I probably got a little bit too swept up in the hype train with him as well, coming out of the play-in tournament, because I did think that that was something that we could have seen, in a sort of ceiling that I was waiting for. Now, we saw the regression in the second half of the season. Injuries are definitely a part of that. So that definitely dings him, and the fact that it didn't seem like he necessarily had that alpha number 1 mentality in a lot of these postseason matchups, but he's still somebody that I do think can unlock that. He's already one of the best passers in the NBA, led the league in assists this season with that scoring upside as well. I'd really like to see him be able to lock down more on the defensive side of the ball, where it seems like he should be able to, because he's not the tallest player in the world, obviously not as much as some of the other guys that are going to be coming up on this list, but he still has length. We see on the offensive side of the ball, his footwork and sort of his body control is elite. That should be able to translate to the defensive side of the ball, but it just gets pushed around very easily, and maybe that has to do with the injuries he's currently dealing with. But Tyrese Halliburton made his first All-NBA team this year. I expect that to be a common occurrence moving forward here for Halliburton. Number 5, I have Paolo Banchero. Paolo, the man who has been deprived of all of these national TV games, I think is on his way. one of my favorite players to watch in terms of being a difficult shot maker. He's so much bigger than the majority of people realize. The fact that he is, close to being a 7-footer, and he is just a physical force. Now, some of the biggest concerns with him are maybe playmaking. I actually thought he did a better job of operating the pick and roll as the ball handler this season. So that's maybe something that when you're talking about being a franchise centerpiece, would like to see him improve there, but still very young. Just his second season, he was drafted in 2022. So yes, 2 years in the NBA, and he's going to be a prominent force for years to come in my eyes, and I'm really excited to see how he's able to elevate his game. Number 4, I have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Really no question here. Already debatably a top 5 player in the NBA, and that being said, I mean, it almost feels wrong as I say that out loud, knowing that I have him at number 4, but I think that that goes to speak to, the youth talent that we have in the NBA as things currently stand. Shai is going to be 26 in just a couple months, so maybe, somebody who is going to be entering his prime very shortly, a prominent 30-point per game scorer, and somebody that, as this Oklahoma City team continues to sort of develop around him, he is going to be hitting his prime in the perfect time, I think, for the rest of this roster to be able to sort of fall in line behind him, and he leads them moving forward. Number 3, don't feel great about this one either necessarily, is I do have Anthony Edwards at number 3. Listen, we know how incredible he is. We've heard all of the comparisons to Michael Jordan throughout this postseason run. Now, I think that maybe I don't think I am, because this is, again, a little bit of a 5-year experiment. Anthony Edwards, if we're talking today, is probably ahead of the next player I have on this list, but Anthony Edwards provides absolutely everything you can look for in an NBA star, where he has the marketability, he has the leadership skills, and we've seen that sort of, all the way throughout here with Anthony Edwards, and curious to see how he's going to respond to some of the adversity that he's faced through Game 7 and the beginning of this Mavericks series, where the Timberwolves are trailing 0-1 so far to the Mavericks. But someone who the Timberwolves fans can feel great that they have their franchise guy for the next decade plus. Number 2, I had Victor Wembanyama. And listen, I understand the resume perspective of Wemby's game so far. He's very young into his career, and the other part that does scare me a little bit is potential injury concern, being a 7-footer. But Wemby should be one of the best players in the NBA in no time, if he isn't already. He's the first rookie in NBA history to be All-NBA first-team defense. Now, take with that what you will, considering some of the new format stuff in the past. He probably would have had to be second-team. But regardless, Wembanyama, the defensive upside with him, he is already one of the best anchors in the league. We've seen the 3-point shooting splits from him. If he can actually, we've talked about this before on the show, his off the dribble 3-point shooting is actually better than his catch and shoot threes. Once that starts to fall, which I have no doubt that he'll be able to, and once the Spurs can actually put some ball handlers around him, he is going to be unstoppable as long as he's fully healthy, and I am all the way here for it. Let me know in the comments section if you have Anthony Edwards over him. I had a really hard time deciding between these two, but number 1, I have Luka Doncic, which was sort of the inspiration for putting together this list. The Ringer had him at number 4. 5 first-team All-NBA appearances in his first 6 years. That just didn't fly by my book. So Luka Doncic is just in, all generational talent. We've seen it already with him. The scoring ability, the passing ability. Is he flawless on defense? Absolutely not. And if you want to talk 5 years from now, I do think it's a debate. if any of these other players, specifically in the top 4, could end up passing him. But I think that I have no problem whatsoever with Luka being viewed as the number 1 player on this list because of just the offensive hub that he is. We've seen him hit the big shots, and as much as I'm not the biggest fan of his defense, like we saw in Game 1, breaking up the lob against Gobert in Game 1 and then going down on the other side and taking an ISO opportunity against an all-defensive player in Jaden McDaniels and hitting a tough bucket over him. He's already, in that top 3, at least top 5 conversation in the NBA, and I couldn't believe, really, that the Ringer had him outside of the top 3, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. We do have a comment from Lil Fettuccine. Is Boston sweeping? I think that it's hard to discount the Pacers. They have been able to be resilient all throughout this postseason run, be down in both of the past series and come back from that. The issue is Tyrese Halliburton with the injury that he is currently dealing with. If he's not there, I have a really hard time imagining the Pacers can be the same level of offense as we've seen from them in the past. Now, probably to some degree could have an argument that they'd be a little bit better on defense, but I still don't think that they are stopping the Celtics and are going to be able to outscore the Celtics without him. Pascal Siakam was incredible last night, and despite that, they just didn't get the offensive production, especially in those minutes that Tyrese Halliburton wasn't on the court. That's when the 20-0 run occurred in that second quarter. So I don't think that we are going to see the Pacers necessarily be able to come back. If Halliburton is out, I'm calling it a sweep for the Celtics, but at the same time, don't want to fully discredit the Pacers because they've shown that they can sort of come up in big moments. And also, not for nothing, we've seen the Celtics in some of these instances sort of let their guard down and be caught sort of lacking a little bit from a mental perspective. But I think that the Celtics also showed some level of being locked in when they were able to put together the performance they did last night. But that is all we have for this top 10 list. Again, let me know what you agree, disagree with in the comment section, because I am 100% sure that not everybody is going to share the same views as me. But now we are going to be diving into our next segment, talking about the New York Yankees and the comments from Hal Steinbrenner on the situation surrounding the Yankees payroll and about it not being sustainable. So we're going to be diving into that when we come back for the break. But Lil Fettuccine, it's the Celtics winning the finals in my eyes. So stick with us and we will be right back.